In the vast desert skies, Arya Flynn flies her aging Cessna, unaware she's trespassed into newly restricted airspace. Two F-16s scramble to intercept, weapons armed. But in the command center, Commander Nathaniel Cross sees a ghost from the past. Falcon Echo 1, a legendary pilot long thought gone. As the radar signature is confirmed, Cross hesitates, remembering her impossible missions, her silent exit after tragedy, and her unmatched flying instinct. The tension peaks. Will he give the order to fire? Or will he trust a legend reborn? As jets close in, the world holds its breath, because Arya's past is catching up fast. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. We share the untold stories of real courage and quiet strength, heroes who never asked for recognition. Your support helps us keep these powerful moments alive. Join our journey. Let no true hero go unseen. The voice crackled with urgency through Arya Flynn's radio. Unknown aircraft, change course now or we will engage. But inside her aging, sun-bleached Cessna 172, Arya didn't even blink. Her grip on the yoke stayed solid, eyes calm as they scanned the endless stretch of pale blue above the vast desert. She had no idea that at that very moment, two sleek F-16 fighter jets had her in their sights, their missiles armed and ready, just waiting for a single command. Far away inside a high-security control room, humming with tension, lives and decisions hung in the balance. One word would decide the outcome of it all. But that word didn't come. Instead, stand down, that's her. That was Arya Flynn. Who was this woman whose name alone could bring a military strike to a grinding halt? What past did she carry that could silence a room full of hardened officers? The answers, buried deep in her history, would leave anyone breathless. To most, Arya lived a life so quiet and unremarkable, it barely cast a shadow. But to her, it was perfectly sized, just enough space to exist, to heal, and to keep moving. The wide, arid sprawl of the American Southwest was her haven, its isolation a balm for wounds no one saw. The sky above, an infinite canvas of silence, held all the things she couldn't say, regrets, distant memories, and an emotions she'd long since stopped naming. The few people who lived near her knew little. She was the woman with the battered old Cessna, the one who flew alone and spoke to no one unless necessary. She maintained her plane by herself, handled every bolt, every oil check. No one knew what she'd done before, and no one asked. That was exactly how Arya wanted it. Her days followed a simple rhythm. Morning brought coffee brewed thick and strong, sipped slowly on the porch of her weathered trailer as the sunrise clawed its way across the desert floor, turning sand and rock into a golden sea. Afterwards, she would walk the short path to the small, private strip she rented, a forgotten stretch of cracked tarmac fringed by sagebrush and dust. Every morning, she'd run her hands along the Cessna's sun-baked fuselage like one would greet an old friend. And to Arya, that's exactly what it was. Her plane didn't care about politics, headlines, or whatever ghost trailed behind her. It just flew, and flying was the last thing that made perfect sense to her in a world that no longer did. That day, like every other, Arya did what brought her peace. She climbed into the cockpit, buckled herself in, and let the world fall away beneath her wings. The thrum of the engine filled the cabin, the yoke firm beneath her fingers, the vast stretch of blue pulling her upward. In the air, she could breathe. She could think, but not every thought came smooth and weightless. Some had jagged edges that snagged at her heart. She thought about the students she had trained over the years, nervous executives trying to tame their fear of turbulence, a young girl determined to earn her a pilot's license on babysitting wages, an old man who wanted to feel the wind in his face before arthritis stole his chance forever. None of them knew who she really was. They didn't need to. They only needed someone calm, focused, and steady beside them. Arya was that. At 3,000 feet, she cruised, unaware that anything had gone wrong. Her radio buzzed with ordinary chatter, and she lost herself in the rhythm of flight, eyes casually sweeping the horizon like she'd done so many times before. But one small detail had slipped by her, a glitch in her transponder. She didn't see that the boundary for restricted airspace had recently changed. She hadn't updated her maps. Miles away in the cold precision of the command center at Edwards Air Force Base, radar operators and officers stared at flickering monitors. The space was dim, filled with the gentle clatter of keyboards and quiet voices relaying data. Blue light spilled across serious faces, both young and experienced. On those screens, planes came and went, commercial flights streaking across states, supply craft hauling equipment, private aircraft flying predictable routes. All routine. Until suddenly something wasn't. Unidentified contact. Bearing 270, Angels. 3, speed 90 knots. The voice reporting the anomaly was tight, uncertain. It belonged to Ortiz, a young radar technician who was sharp and eager, but still knew enough that pressure shook his confidence. His eyes locked onto the blip on the screen, small, inconsistent, flying where nothing should be. He didn't know who it was. Not yet. Ortiz's eyes were locked on the radar screen, brows knit in concern. The blip he was tracking pulsed irregularly, off rhythm, like a heartbeat under strain. It didn't match any known flight plans. No transponder, no ID tag, nothing to peg it to a registry. Probably a glitch, someone behind him muttered, with a dismissive shrug, but Ortiz didn't answer. He wasn't convinced. There was something about the movement, the way it edged into the restricted zone with quiet intent, that sent a ripple of unease through his chest. At the next workstation, Duty Commander Nathaniel Cross glanced up from his mountain of readiness reports. He wasn't the kind of officer to jump at every radar anomaly, not after nearly 3 decades of service, 3 overseas deployments, and more nights buried in command centers than he cared to count. But Ortiz's voice, the tension threading through it, made him pause. Cross stood, walked over, and said simply, "Show me." Ortiz highlighted the signal. Cross squinted at the screen. The contact was small, sluggish, maybe a single-engine Cessna, but something about it didn't sit right. The radar signature flickered like a corrupted file, a stuttering, broken pattern. Not clean, glitched. It was more than that. Underneath the noise, buried in the chaos, something about it tugged at Cross's memory. Familiar yet out of place. His pulse ticked faster. "Hail them," he ordered. Instantly, the team sprang into action. Controllers issued warning after warning over civilian frequencies, voices firm and clear. "Unidentified aircraft, this is Edwards Air Force Base. You are currently in restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately." Static. No reply. Ortiz's throat went dry. He stared at the screen, watched as the blip crept farther into the no-fly zone. A sector that had only recently been expanded, something the average civilian pilot probably wouldn't even know yet. "Sir," Ortiz hesitated, then added, "it's headed toward the test range. That triggers protocol." Cross didn't pause. "Launch alert. Scramble a pair. I want eyes on that bird." Moments later, 2 F-16s thundered into the sky, their engines cutting across the dark like blades of fire. Inside the command center, everyone held their breath. Call signs lit up on the console as the pilots received vectors and adjusted course. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. This wasn't just an anomaly. Not in today's world. Not with what history had taught them. In the post-9/11 reality, any unidentified craft in restricted skies wasn't just a problem. It was a potential threat. And threats had to be answered, decisively. But that signal, Cross still couldn't shake it. It clung to the back of his mind like a memory half-formed. Something about it felt wrong. Eerie. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing at the screen, and that chill crawling up his spine refused to let go. He reached for a secondary console. "Ortiz, run a signature analysis, deep archive cross-check." Ortiz blinked, taken aback. "Sir, you mean?" "Yes," Cross said, his tone final. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Fingers flying over the keys, Ortiz pulled from data reserves so classified that few people in the room even knew they existed. The analysis dragged on, every second heavy with anticipation. The system crawled through old code, outdated logs, forgotten call signs. Then, a soft chime. Ortiz stared at the result, silent for a full heartbeat. "Sir, 94% correlation, Falcon Echo 1. The name landed like a hammer blow. The room fell into stunned silence. Cross could feel it, every eye locked on the screen, every breath held. Falcon Echo 1. It was a call sign most of them had only heard in passing, in stories shared late at night over drinks, or whispered in the back corners of break rooms. A name woven into legend. A pilot whose skills in the air had defied explanation. Missions that were classified beyond belief. Some even declared impossible. But she'd pulled them off. Until one day she'd disappeared. Gone. Dead, some said. Lost in action, others whispered. A ghost that vanished into the system and was never seen again. Until now, Cross's heart pounded against his ribs. He had been a young captain back then. He remembered watching her fly from the ground, breath caught in his throat as she performed maneuvers no one thought could be done by anything not made of magic. He remembered the briefings that followed, heavily redacted but always laced with awe. The way older commanders spoke of her was unlike anything else, reverent, fearful even. And he remembered the silence that followed her final flight, the abruptness, the grief no one was allowed to speak. Her name struck from rosters, her call sign left to fade into myth, and now here it was again. That signature, buried under corrupted code, unmistakable at its core. Cross leaned in toward the radio. Viper 111, Viper 12, confirm visual when able. His voice held steady, but every nerve in his body was buzzing. High above, the two F-16s sliced through the clouds, radar locked onto their target. Radar confirms a Cessna, single engine, civilian markings. The lead pilot's voice crackled through. Then a pause. But sir, she's flying it like it's a part of her. Cross gripped the edge of the console, knuckles white. The room held its breath, waiting for the next word to fall from his lips. Hold fire. It was a command delivered not with hesitation, but with the weight of memory. Because if this really was Falcon Echo 1, if, by some impossible stroke of fate, this ghost had returned from the dead, then the very last thing he could allow was to shoot down the greatest pilot the service had ever known. Outside the world of the military, the name Falcon Echo 1 carried no weight. It wasn't engraved into any monuments, nor did it flash across news headlines. But for those who had worn the uniform, especially those who had taken to the skies, that name carried with it a quiet reverence. It floated like vapor in the upper reaches of war zones, whispered across briefing rooms, and echoed in cockpit folklore. And behind that name was Arya Flynn, a woman who never chased fame but became a legend precisely because she never tried to be one. Arya's journey didn't begin with glory. It started in the most ordinary way. Rejection, self-doubt, in the slow, steady burn of silent perseverance. She didn't grow up in a house filled with flight jackets and call signs. Her family had no military ties, no legacy to ride on. She came from a working-class town where the sky was just something you stared at between factory shifts. While other kids played ball in the streets, Arya tilted her head back and watched the contrails of passing jets, chasing dreams that felt a world away. When she told her high school counselor she wanted to become an Air Force pilot, the reply was kind, but dismissive. You might want to set your goals on something more realistic, Arya. Maybe college or a trade. Her first application to the Air Force didn't just fall short, it was rejected outright. Her scores were nothing special. Her physical abilities, average at best. There was nothing on paper that stood out. But the thing about Arya, the one thing no system, no test, no interview could ever measure, was what lived deep inside her. An unwavering, unshakable will. She didn't quit. She applied again. Denied again. And again. And it was on the third attempt, when most people would have moved on, that she slipped through the narrow crack of opportunity. Barely. Flight school didn't roll out any red carpet for her. She wasn't top of her class in speed or strength, but she outlasted everyone. When others took breaks, Arya pored over manuals. When her peers toasted a past check ride, she broke down her own performance, pinpointing where she could shave milliseconds off reaction time or fly a line closer to perfection. Then came that day. An instructor, standing on the tarmac, eyes wide in disbelief, watched as Arya wrestled a damaged trainer jet through a simulated engine failure, one that by all rights should have ended in a catastrophic crash, and guided it down like a leaf settling on still water. That was the moment the murmurs started. Flynn, she's got something you can't teach. What Arya possessed wasn't just skill, it was something rarer, an almost preternatural connection with her aircraft. a kind of pilot's intuition that transcended training or logic. She didn't calculate her moves, she became them. In the cockpit, she transformed, composed, exact, commanding. It didn't take long for the higher-ups to notice. She was tapped for elite missions, then black ops. Then came the mission, the one that would etch her call sign into legend. The details are still classified. The official reports have entire sections blacked out. But what's known, what can be said, is this. In a hostile zone, 7 American pilots had been shot down and stranded behind enemy lines. The territory was crawling with enemy units. Missile sites blanketed the region. Fighter patrols circled like sharks. Every strategy team came to the same grim conclusion. A rescue attempt would mean unacceptable losses. It couldn't be done. Arya didn't wait for orders. She stepped forward, volunteered, alone. Strapped into a modified F-16, equipped for extended range and cutting-edge jamming capabilities, she lifted off into the belly of the storm. On paper, it looked like a death wish. But once Falcon Echo 1 took the skies, it turned into something else entirely. What she did defied every doctrine and expectation. Arya read the enemy like a book written in real time. She wove through radar webs, baited interceptors into traps, used the terrain's every twist to her advantage. She dismantled the threat piece by piece. SAM sites eliminated with surgical precision, enemy aircraft outflown and outgunned, ground troops thrown into disarray. All the while, she coordinated with the downed pilots, threading her way through chaos and danger to guide them step by step to a covert extraction zone. She didn't just make the rescue possible, she made it clean. Every one of those 7 pilots came home. Not one additional life lost. The mission debrief reads like a screenplay no one would greenlight for being too unbelievable. Command was floored. Generals demanded to meet the pilot behind the operation. Medals were readied, ceremonies arranged. But Arya declined the spotlight. "Give the credit to the teams who kept my bird flying," she said. "I just did what I was trained to do." That humility became her trademark. What followed that mission, nicknamed Iron Resolve by those who heard about it, were a series of ops that even the boldest wouldn't dare attempt. Missions so dangerous, only a ghost would volunteer. And time and again, that ghost had a name. Falcon Echo 1. Arya Flynn. From deep behind enemy lines, she always led the charge. Falcon Echo 1, the call sign whispered with awe across squadrons. When elite enemy pilots rose to dominate the skies, Arya Flynn was sent to meet them head-on. She didn't just defeat them, she dismantled their dominance with skills so precise, it bordered on artistry. Every time she climbed into the cockpit, command exhaled with confidence. Missions succeeded under her control like clockwork. Yet when the roar of engines faded and the debriefs were done, Arya slipped into the shadows. She declined interviews, turned down promotion boards, and rejected accolades that others would have seized. She never sought the spotlight. Her fellow pilots spoke of her with deep respect. There was no swagger in her step, no boast in her voice. She simply flew, and anyone lucky enough to witness, it never forgot. In her hands, the F-16 wasn't just a fighter. It was a living, breathing thing that moved with uncanny grace, like it had a soul of its own. An older pilot once put it best, "When she was in the sky, you didn't worry about the enemy, you just tried to keep up." Why she shunned attention was the subject of many theories. Some said it was humility, others whispered it was guilt for those she couldn't bring home. But the truth was simpler than all that. Arya never needed recognition. The sky was enough. The silence between the missions, the solemn hum of jet engines winding down, that was her sanctuary. Somewhere deep inside, she understood what real service meant. It wasn't about collecting medals or appearing in headlines. It was about executing the mission, then quietly stepping aside. And so the legend of Falcon Echo 1 grew. No official portraits, no viral interviews, just whispers and secondhand tales. A ghost drifting through the corridors of aviation history. A figure who symbolized sacrifice, duty, and the strength to walk away without applause. Years passed, and then, out of nowhere, that ghost reappeared. Her call sign blipped across radar screens at Edwards Air Force Base, electrifying the air. For some, it sparked unease. For others, a kind of reverence. Arya Flynn, once the phantom pilot of impossible missions, was back in their airspace. But it wasn't combat that had left its mark on her. It wasn't the missions, the kills, or the missiles she had dodged. Those battles never haunted her. What haunted her came later, when there was no enemy jet in her sights, no threat on her radar, just a calm blue sky over American soil, and what should have been a routine day. It was a training session at Edwards, nothing special on the docket, just a formation exercise with two of the brightest, most promising young pilots Arya had ever mentored. They idolized her, as so many did. To them, flying beside Falcon Echo 1 was like flying next to a living legend. Though Arya detested the term, she pushed them hard, not to break them, but to prepare them. She understood the price of war. She knew that precision, discipline, and instinct weren't optional. They were the difference between coming home and not. And she wouldn't let them falter, not under her command. But that day something went wrong. They were flying in tight formation, banking into a high-altitude coordinated turn, when one of the young pilots, eager, maybe too eager, misjudged the distance. In his nervousness, in trying to impress, he got too close. His wingtip caught the other jet. In a heartbeat, both aircraft spiraled out of control, colliding violently in a twisting ballet of steel, fire, and smoke. There was no time to eject. No warning. No chance. From her cockpit, Arya watched it unfold. Powerless. Helpless. The sky that had always answered to her suddenly turned black, choked with smoke and silence. An investigation followed, as they always do. The board combed through every detail. They cleared her of fault. Her commands were flawless. Her flight plan, meticulous. The conclusion was clear. Pilot error. A tragic accident. Nothing she could have done. But Arya didn't need a board to tell her what happened. She already knew. And knowing didn't bring peace. It brought endless loops of memory, split-second images playing on repeat in her mind. The flash of collision, the sudden flare of fire, the quiet that came after. She had demanded perfection, and in the pursuit of it, two brilliant young lives were lost. Guilt didn't just visit her, it took up residence, deep and corrosive. It wasn't guilt born from a mistake. It was the kind of guilt that comes from surviving when others didn't. She had walked away. Again. Why? Why did the sky spare her once more? There were no answers, only questions and the steady thrum of nightmares. The Air Force tried to intervene. They offered her everything: counseling, time off, a reassignment on the ground where she could rest and recover. She accepted outwardly, sat through therapy, listened, nodded. But inside, something had fractured. The sky that had always been her refuge now felt foreign. The machine she had trusted, the F-16, now looked like a stranger. But even more unsettling was her own mind. The steel composure she once held had unraveled. Her PTSD didn't come in the form of flashbacks to war, as others might have expected. Instead, it was the quiet that shattered her. The empty hangars, the still silhouette of a fighter jet on the tarmac, the sound of wind moving across concrete. All reminders of what was lost. And so Arya Flynn, the legend, the ghost, the warrior who once danced through battle like she was born in the sky, faded from view. Until now. The wind hissed against the aircraft's fuselage, an old sound Arya Flynn had once found comforting. Now, in moments like these, when she stood alone in the hangars or the airstrips, it only echoed the emptiness inside her. She would look out across the tarmac and feel the invisible weight pressing down, the weight of loss, of silence. The faces of fallen pilots haunted her thoughts. Friends who never made it back. Voices that used to fill her world, now nothing more than memory. Her final evaluation flight had exposed a truth everyone had felt but no one dared speak. Arya still flew with flawless precision. Her reflexes were intact, her coordination sharp. Every maneuver she executed was textbook perfect. Her hands hadn't forgotten how to fly. But the fire was gone. That fierce, unshakable confidence that once made her seem unstoppable. It had flickered out. She was capable, certainly. But Arya Flynn had never lived to be simply capable. That was never who she was. 6 months later, she filed her discharge papers. There were no formalities, no applauding crowds or brass speeches thanking her for years of service. Arya wouldn't have wanted it. Quietly, she emptied her locker, turned in her gear, and disappeared before sunrise the following morning. No goodbyes, no clues, just gone. She left behind only a small note, scrawled in her sharp handwriting on a plain yellow slip, neatly folded and placed on Commander Nathaniel Cross's desk. It read, "Thank you for the opportunity to serve. AF." She had chosen the quiet over recognition, anonymity over medals. The Air Force tried, of course. They offered posthumous honors for the fallen pilots she'd saved, tried to bring her back for tributes and reunions. She declined every time. She wanted no stage, no spotlight. Instead, she relocated to a remote stretch of the American Southwest, a place where her name meant nothing and no one asked questions. She bought an aging Cessna with her own money and lived simply, taught flying lessons to eager kids and retirees with dreams, flew charity missions, kept to herself. To most, she was just another civilian pilot getting by. But among those who wore flight suits in every control tower and briefing room across the country, the legend of Falcon Echo 1 refused to fade. Pilots still whispered her name like a secret prayer. And whenever she took to the night sky, the past flew with her. The ones she lost remained with her, silent, invisible, but always there. Now, two F-16s sliced through the desert skies, engines howling like wild beasts over the sand. Their wings gleamed under the afternoon sun, catching up fast to the small, time-worn Cessna flying low over the restricted zone. In the cockpits, fingers hovered near the triggers, their eyes locked on the unexpected intruder ahead, a civilian plane that shouldn't be there, a blip on radar that screamed unauthorized, unknown. Inside the command center at Edwards Air Force Base, the atmosphere was charged like the air before a storm. Every monitor glowed, radios buzzed with static and clipped instructions. Commander Nathaniel Cross stood stiff, one hand braced on the console, eyes fixed on the screen before him. The radar pulsed. The signature flashed again. Falcon Echo 1. Impossible. Could it really be her? Could Arya Flynn, the woman who had vanished without a trace, be flying right now through this very airspace, unaware that in mere seconds she might be taken down? Viper 111, target is in visual range, awaiting final authorization. The radio cut in with the voice of the F-16 flight leader. Calm, precise. A voice trained to follow orders without pause or doubt. Cross clenched his jaw. Procedure was clear. An unidentified aircraft in restricted skies. No response to hails. He had full authority, no, the duty to eliminate the threat. He knew the protocol word for word. He could feel the command rising in his throat. Engage, neutralize the contact. But it wouldn't come out. Not with that call sign glaring on the screen. Not with her name clawing at his thoughts. Nathaniel Cross was not a sentimental man. He couldn't afford to be. Too many years in uniform had weathered that out of him. He'd given orders that sent brave men and women into deadly missions. Signed condolence letters no one should have to write. He lived by the code. Duty first. But duty wasn't blind. It wasn't rote obedience. It required judgment. And at this moment, his judgment bore down on him like gravity. His mind drifted to a younger version of himself, back when he was just a captain, naive, restless, convinced he understood the world. That was before he saw Falcon Echo 1 in action, before he watched Arya Flynn complete a mission no one believed possible, before he saw her pull 7 downed pilots out of enemy territory and return without expecting a shred of recognition. He remembered the quiet way she walked, the humility with which she deflected praise, the fierce pride she carried, silent, steady, and impossible to fake, and the way she vanished without a trace when she no longer believed she could give her best. Now her name was back on the screen, Falcon Echo 1, and Cross had seconds left to decide whether to let her fly or give the order that would end the legend for good. The weight of loss had grown too heavy to bear, not for recognition, not to reclaim glory, but simply because she couldn't stomach the thought of failing others one more time. That alone had brought her back. Or had it? Was this truly her return or merely someone else flying under her call sign to stall for time? Was this all some elaborate deception? A trick cloaked in memory? The risk was too high to be certain of anything. Sir, the voice crackled over the radio, firm and expectant. It was time for orders. Cross drew in a breath, slow and heavy. He turned his gaze across the room at his team, some seasoned veterans, others young and fresh, but every single one of them had their eyes locked on him. They waited for his decision, each life in the air suspended by the words he was about to speak. Hold position, he said at last, his voice unwavering. Do not engage. A pause filled the airwaves. Sir, confirm, target is non-responsive. This is restricted airspace. Cross gave a small nod, knowing the pilots couldn't see it. He pressed the mic again. Steady. Confirmed. Viper 111, stand down. Maintain surveillance only. No engagement. The pilots responded, their tone tinged with uncertainty, but they obeyed. They always had. That trust, they gave it freely, but Cross felt the gravity of that. It wasn't light. It never was. Around him, the command center let out a collective breath. Relief flooded the room, yet Cross remained still, tense. His mind replayed everything that had just occurred. He knew, by regulation, by every protocol, he'd crossed a line. There would be consequences, maybe worse. But the rules were made for clear situations, for binary decisions. In this was different. This was about duty, not the kind stamped on medals or recited in ceremonies. Real duty meant knowing the difference between pulling a trigger and staying your hand. It was about defending more than just airspace or borders. It was about guarding the very ideals those lines represented. Arya Flynn had lived by those ideals. She had given all she had to uphold them. Never asked for praise, never demanded anything in return. And when she could no longer meet her own standard, she had quietly stepped away, not wanting to take up a place she didn't feel she deserved. Cross hadn't forgotten. He refused to let her story end beneath the fire of her own side, not in the same desert she'd once fought to protect. Viper 11, Viper 12, he spoke with finality. Return to base. Let her fly. There was no hesitation in his tone, no apology, only certainty. High above, the two F-16s banked off, their paths veering away, leaving the lone Cessna untouched. Cross watched the radar screen as the small blip headed westward, unaware of the storm it had narrowly avoided. Unaware that a single call could have ended it all, she had no idea the decision that had just been made in her favor. Cross stood motionless for a long time, the quiet hum of the command center slowly resuming its rhythm around him. But something inside him had shifted, a quiet reckoning, a reminder that sometimes the greatest service is restraint, that not all heroes operate under a flag or wear the weight of rank. Some fly alone, silent, steady, loyal to nothing but the sky. Over the desert, the sun began its long descent, pouring golden light across the earth and deepening the shadows around it. The weathered Cessna 172 continued forward, engine humming, as its pilot remained calm, focused, completely unaware she had just brushed the edge of death. Arya Flynn adjusted her controls, trimming for descent with quiet precision. She focused only on the dials, on the feel of the aircraft in her hands. The familiar outline of Henderson Executive Airport emerged ahead, nothing more than a gray strip etched into the cracked skin of the sun-baked land. She clicked her radio. Henderson Tower, Cessna 869er on final, runway 35. The controller responded immediately, granting clearance without pause. Just another aircraft. Just another flight ending without incident. No one in that tower knew what had just transpired in the skies. No one knew that two armed fighter jets had shadowed her only minutes earlier, poised to strike. Her wheels touched the runway with a soft thump, and that quiet, fleeting wave of relief washed over her. The peace that came with every safe landing, brief but grounding. She guided the Cessna toward the small terminal, the engine gradually slowing. Waiting on the tarmac was Jake, the young mechanic who always handled her refuels. He stood with a broad smile, hand raised in greeting. Admiration practically radiated from him. In his eyes, Arya was the real deal. A pilot's pilot. He didn't know her past, but he respected her deeply all the same. Arya didn't see herself that way. Not anymore. To her, she was just a woman who had found a kind of fragile solace in the ski, someone trying, bit by bit, to make up for the things she couldn't change. Not with grandeur or fanfare, but with small, deliberate acts. In the back of the Cessna, a duffel bag sat strapped down filled with notebooks, pencils, and backpacks. School supplies she had collected for a local charity, one that helped kids who had little to call their own. No one watching would have guessed that moments ago she'd come within seconds of being erased from the sky. No one would have guessed she was once someone who carried missions that would never be spoken of. Now she simply flew, and she gave, quietly, without the world ever noticing. And maybe she thought that was enough. Tucked carefully beside the instrument panel was a time-worn folder, edges frayed, pages softened from years of handling. Inside it were flight certificates, 3 of them, each bearing the name of a teenager she'd trained during the summer. They were proud of their achievements, but none of them had the faintest idea of who she truly was. Not one of them knew that their calm, attentive instructor had once danced through dogfights with seasoned aces, had broken free from missile locks with precision that left even her enemies stunned. To them, she was simply the mentor who believed in them when no one else did. She was the quiet presence who saw something in them, something worth nurturing. Arya Flynn stepped down from the cockpit, her boots crunching against the tarmac in the fading light of evening. Jake was already rushing toward her, words tumbling out about a minor engine issue he'd noticed during his solo run. She listened carefully, offering a warm nod and a few gentle suggestions. Encouragement came easily to her now. She didn't need to prove anything. This was who she had become, not a legend cloaked in medals, but a woman who gave her time freely to those in need. She lifted others with soft strength, with patient words and quiet faith in their potential. What she didn't realize, what she could never fully see, was how far the echoes of her kindness would travel. The girl she had taught to control an aircraft with steady hands and a calm mind would, years later, join a search and rescue unit, flying straight into tempests to pull others to safety. The boy whose spark she had reignited, who once doubted his worth, would go on to become a flight instructor himself, teaching new pilots with the same compassion Arya had shown him. And the children who had received her donated supplies in remote villages would grow up remembering the nameless woman who had given them hope, and maybe one day they'd choose to do the same for someone else. Arya Flynn, the legend whose name was never shouted from podiums, was changing the world in ways that would never make headlines. Her story wasn't just about a gifted pilot. It was about something much more enduring, more universal. A truth passed down through generations, quietly woven through every town, every city, every quiet corner of the world. It was the story of the heroes who asked for nothing, the ones who never expect to be seen. We so often think of heroism in terms of grand moments, ticker tape parades, shiny medals, viral videos, public accolades. But Arya had chosen a different road. She chose the solitude of the sky, the comfort of silence, and the dignity of steady, uncelebrated service. She could have had it all, the interviews, the documentaries, the eternal spotlight, but that was never her reason for flying, never her reason for serving. Her story is a gentle reminder that the deepest kind of honor doesn't beg for recognition. Real service doesn't demand applause. There are pilots, medics, teachers, firefighters, social workers, and quiet guardians among us. People who give everything they have, every single day, and walk among us unnoticed. They don't wear uniforms of fame. They don't clamor for attention. They just do what needs to be done because they believe it's right. And sometimes, like Arya Flynn, they carry their burdens alone. They live with invisible scars, fight internal wars long after their missions end, yet they keep showing up. They keep giving. Silently, steadily, changing the world in ways we may never fully understand. Our world struggles with the tension between visible glory and invisible sacrifice. We're drawn to what shines, what trends, what dazzles. But the Arya Flynns remind us that greatness often hides in everyday places, in the teacher who never gave up on a student, the neighbor who shows up without being asked, the stranger who gives when no one's watching. So now, take a moment, ask yourself, do we truly see our real heroes? When did we last pause to look past the surface, to recognize the quiet courage and unwavering integrity of those around us? How many have we overlooked simply because they never sought the spotlight? If Arya's story stirred something in your heart, hold on to that feeling. Think of someone in your life who gave without asking, who chose service over applause. Share their story. Let their light be seen. Let's make space for the unsung, the unseen, the unforgettable acts of quiet heroism that shape our world every day. And if this story touched you, help us bring more of these moments to the surface. Like, subscribe, and stand with us as we shine a light on those who never ask for it. Let's make sure no true hero is ever left unseen. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.